Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Picking Up Rubber. I am your host, Justin Russo, and today we are reviewing the British GP that took place at Silverstone just this past weekend. Wild race. I think by far the race of the year. From lap one, we had a crazy incident. Everything in the race just kept kind of piling on, and by the end, it was pure chaos. So there's a lot to dive into, and as I mentioned, lap one was insane. Let's just get right into and start with lap one. The insane crash, George Russell, Pierre Gasly, and then, of course, Zhou Guanyu, who ends up going all the way to the tire barriers, gets wedged in between the tire barriers on the roof of the car, essentially. Let's just go over kind of what happened. So the start, George Russell gets a little bogged down. He and Zhou Guanyu are kind of fighting for position on the left side of the track. Of course, it's a right-handed turn one going into Silverstone. Pierre Gasly tries to kind of get up the middle in between the both of them. George Russell goes to close him off. Obviously, either didn't see him or just completely misjudged where Pierre Gasly was. Turns into the left, hits Pierre Gasly, and then hits Zhou Guanyu as well with his front tires. And it immediately flips Zhou Guanyu's car. He slides right away. He's on the roof of his car. You can see the onboard camera actually on his car shuts off because right away he flips over, and the T-cam, where that is on the roll hoop, just disintegrated, and it was completely gone, which is a big problem that I'll talk about in just a second. But essentially, Zhou Guanyu goes on his roof all the way past the gravel, and then just an insane kind of turn of events. He kind of digs into the dirt right in front of the tire barrier, and the whole car just flips over, and it wedges itself in between the tire barrier and the catch fence, which was very dramatic, and it was very tough to watch, honestly. And you know, we didn't see the replays of it initially because obviously the broadcast doesn't want to show something tragic happening to Zhou Guanyu. It's completely understandable. And with the way the car looked and how hard it was wedged into the that little gap there, who knows what would have happened. Eventually, thankfully, we even saw George Russell on top of the tire barriers with all the marshals. He got out. Everyone was trying to help Zhou Guanyu. The halo, it saved his life. I think you can say, add another win for the halo. That saved Zhou Guanyu's life because he was wedged in there so hard. That thing did not budge whatsoever. And even with the roll hoop going, which made his head essentially even closer to the ground because he didn't have that clearance that the roll hoop usually offers, he was so close. And I'm so glad that he was okay. The halo did its job. And what's up with the roll hoop, though? That's not something that F1 teams are thinking about a lot. You know, they're not thinking about what the roll hoop's going to do, you know, when the car flips over, but that's its job, right? It's there. Yes, it's an aerodynamic part of the car, but it's there for safety. And so you have to think about that if you're an F1 team. You have to say, look, this is why this part is here. And yes, it's a rare occurrence that we're going to need it essentially, but it's there for a reason. We have to use it, or we have to make it properly so that when we have to use it, it works. And it just did not work on the Alfa Romeo car. Hopefully that's a one-off thing. And you know, maybe something happened there, but if that's going to be what it's like anytime a driver goes, you know, on his roof essentially or on the lid of the car, that's worrying because, yeah, the halo did its job, but you just never know what could happen in the future, what other types of incidents could happen. We saw, look at Romain Grosjean's crash in 2020. Who could have ever predicted that something like that would have happened? So many things failed on those cars and with the barriers that it just led to the ultimate scary situation. So I think with the roll hoop, the FIA and the F1 needs to look into that, see why it failed, and see what ways it can be improved in the future. So, thankfully, Zhou Guanyu was okay. And people doing the track walk after the race, it was funny. You could even see the divot that it made in the asphalt surface. There was a huge divot that it made, his car just sliding across the track surface. So that was insane to see. There was a lot of people caught up in that crash. Alex Albon got a real bad part of it too. And, you know, he was trying to avoid the crash. He braked really hard, and Sebastian Vettel went into the back of him, turned him to the right, and he hit the wall, the pit wall essentially, the outside of the pit wall that had had no softness to it essentially. It was just a hard wall. He hit the wall. Car goes back to the left-hand side. He gets hit again, goes back to the right. He gets hit one more time. So he had a real rough ride there at the beginning. Thankfully, too, he was okay. He went through a lot. And look, you know, I talk about the roll hoop, but these cars are extremely safe. And it's awesome to see that in such an insane crash with so many things happening between Zhou Guanyu and Alex Albon, people getting hit every which way, both drivers walked away unscathed. They're going to race again in 7 days' time, at least from the time of the race. And that's just great to see. We don't want anybody to get hurt in F1. Yes, it's inherently dangerous. We know this, but we don't want the danger to be the attractor for people. We don't want to say, oh, we love it because we think someone might get hurt this weekend. Of course not. Nobody wants that. So you want the cars to be as safe as possible. It's part of the reason why they've gotten bigger, and some of the rule changes that have been made, maybe that haven't been super popular, have been made just in the name of safety. So really glad to see that. Of course, that brought out the red flag then, so we were kind of in a red flag situation. And I didn't even mention on lap 1, Carlos Sainz, who had pole position, got passed by Max Verstappen. So it was a weird incident here because Carlos Sainz got passed by Max Verstappen. Max into the lead, Sainz in second. I think Lewis got up to third from, I believe, fifth, what he was. So a lot of guys moving up in the order there. And it was funny because you're thinking, okay, well, Max is going to start first. But they had gone such little distance. They hadn't even completed a single sector. They had completed 2 corners of the entire race, or the entire lap, that is. And so race control said, we just have to go back to what the original starting order was. So if you're Max Verstappen, how frustrating is that? Thinking, oh, I got the move done, and now I got to go and do the move again because now I just get sent back. And so on the restart, the second time, it's exactly what happened. Carlos Sainz was able to maintain that lead. Max Verstappen, frustratingly for him, had to stay in second. And just even Lewis Hamilton, again, I mentioned he got up to third. He kind of got bogged back down, didn't get the greatest start. So a lot of things happened, a lot of shuffling happened, and it was frustrating for them. And then you look at what happens then on that second restart. It's Carlos Sainz in the lead, Max Verstappen chasing, and he finally gets him. He finally catches him, I think, probably 10, 15 laps into the race. Max Verstappen takes the lead. And you're thinking, and I personally thought, and I believe I said this to a couple people, just saying, well, there goes the race there. It looked like Max Verstappen had the fastest car all weekend. Yeah, he didn't get pole position, but it looked like if he was able to put the lap together, there was so much pace in that Red Bull, more than the Ferrari could even hope to dream of. I thought the race was over. I thought it was setting up to be kind of a boring one. Yeah, there might be some battles in the back. Boy, was I wrong. What was about to come, I had no idea what was going to hit me. Just a couple laps later, Max Verstappen going down the hanger straight towards the end of the lap starts slowing. He started slowing in Maggots and Beckett's, and then Carlos Sainz catches him and passes him on the hanger straight, and Max pits immediately. We're thinking puncture. I think Martin Brundle was even saying, there's a puncture. They go in, they change the tires, and there was no puncture. The tires were fine. So you're thinking, okay, so now what happened on Max's car? And so Sainz, Leclerc, Hamilton, a bunch of guys are all past Max, and we come to find out he ran over a piece of debris from an AlphaTauri, I believe, and it wedged itself somewhere in the rear of the car. And, Max was even saying on the radio, he said, I can't believe such a small piece, getting wedged in there could make me lose so much performance, and it did. It just tanked his entire race. There was no way for them really to get it out during the pit stops without at least taking a huge amount of time. And that was essentially Max's race gone. He still would go on to finish in the points. He was able to salvage some things, but just wasn't able to get it. And you move on. And a really interesting situation here happens at Ferrari because you have Carlos Sainz in the lead, Charles Leclerc, who also had wing damage, by the way. He and Perez on the second, I believe it was, restart, they made contact, and both of them got wing damage. Perez got sent to the back. Charles Leclerc sustained that wing damage and had to battle with Carlos Sainz. And he was faster than Carlos Sainz, even despite this wing problem. And the team was telling Carlos, hey, you need to push, you need to you need to go faster. Obviously, they were getting ready to tell him, hey, you need to let Charles by. But it just went on for far too long for, I guess, the Grand Ferrari strategy, if you will. And they should have swapped the cars earlier. I understand, it's a tough situation. You have a driver looking for his first win. He's in first place, and you're telling him to swap positions because he's slower. But there's good reason for it because they had some faster cars behind, and Hamilton and Perez that were potentially catching them, and there just wasn't, wasn't much they could do. So ends up they finally let Leclerc by after Sainz can't do really anything. And so, you're thinking, okay, Carlos Sainz plays the team game, and Leclerc's kind of chilling out in front there for a while, and then, boom, safety car hits towards the end of the race. And it was also looking really good for Lewis Hamilton because Lewis Hamilton had just pit onto a fresh new set of hard tires, and he looked like he was going to catch Carlos Sainz, and he was going to catch Charles Leclerc, and he was going to win that race just because of the tire advantage. Then that safety car hits. It was Esteban Ocon coming down the old pitch straight just after, or just before Copse, that is. His car fails. We get a safety car, completely mixes everything up, and we get an interesting call from Ferrari. So I mentioned the team orders, and I'll go into this a little bit more in just a bit too, but they pit Carlos Sainz for softs, and they leave Charles Leclerc out on old hard tires, sort of like what we saw in Abu Dhabi last year, which is not a fair fight. Fresh softs on old hards is that is literally the worst thing you can get on any set of dry tires that you'd want right there. So essentially everyone behind pits on the new softs. Leclerc is just a sitting duck out there. The team even tell Carlos Sainz, and I like this from Sainz, his response, they told him, hey, leave as much space that you can to Charles. We're going to need you to essentially back up everyone to keep him in front. He's saying, look, I'm a sitting duck out here too, guys. I can't just sit back here. I got Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, behind me. I got Sergio Perez and the fastest car on the grid behind me. I got a bunch of guys behind me that are looking to pass me nice and fast here too. I can't just sit back and wait for Charles on old hard tires. I got to go too. And to his credit, he was right, because he both of those drivers would have been just thrown to the wayside if they had gone Ferrari's way. So Sainz right away, before they even get on the Wellington straight, had already passed Charles Leclerc, and tons of battles behind. Lewis Hamilton didn't get a great restart. He and Perez were battling a lot. Perez got right past him too, so just a lot going on that restart. And then, Sainz kind of checks out a little bit, and he was able to just, go out towards the end and have a kind of a essentially clean race, while Perez, Leclerc, and Hamilton were just having the battle of their lives back there. And not even to mention Lando and Fernando Alonso too. They weren't, I wouldn't say in the fight, but they were right there. It was those 5 cars on 5 different teams, the dream of Formula One, I know. They were all just battling for the second place, and it was the best thing to see. And you get the huge moment, right? You get Sergio Perez trying to get past Charles Leclerc. He goes side by side into Stowe with him. They go down to the Vale chicane. Leclerc laid on the brakes. Perez goes in deep, cuts the corner, I will say, a little bit. They're both fighting off the track as they get onto the Hamilton straight, it is, and Lewis Hamilton takes advantage on the straight. It is his namesake, and he goes right past, and of course the legendary call by David Croft, the through goes Hamilton. That was such a great call. I even posted on Twitter earlier this week, looking back on his call of the 2020 race where Hamilton's tire went out, and I was just so in awe of his ability to make that call. And I might even mention on the last episode too, just to process everything in that moment and give out such good information, such an entertaining call. Great by him, and another iconic, call there. Gives you chills every time you listen to it. Unfortunately, Perez was able to get past Hamilton in the next couple of corners, so he didn't get second, he got third. But yeah, just so much happening at the end there. And, that's kind of the quick recap, the spark notes of it. I'm going to go through every team here, kind of my thoughts on everything that happened. And, so let's go through that now. Starting with Red Bull. Man, another reliability issue. It's not really fair, I guess, to say a reliability issue, but, it is worrying to see something that small could damage the car that bad. And, of course, a great job by Max to sustain P7. You have to be happy if you're Red Bull. You lose only 6 points to Charles Leclerc in the championship. I know the constructors, they get a little more, but they really didn't lose out that much to Ferrari on a day that at one point they were both out of the points. Max was down there fighting after his pit stop. Perez had the lap 1 incident with Leclerc. Ferraris are running 1-2, and you barely lose any points. So kind of a blow for Ferrari, the fact they weren't able to get more points out of this, and it's kind of becoming a theme for Ferrari these days where they just cannot, whatever they do, maximize anything that they try. The strategy, the driver's pace, it's whatever it is, reliability, it always gets in the way for them. And it sucks to see for Ferrari because this could have been a huge race for them to climb back in this championship race. It just didn't turn out to be the case. So, obviously, great job by Red Bull. And a huge shout out to Checo. What a drive by him. Just kind of hanging out there for most of the race. Gets the safety car. He was just right back up into the front. Kudos to him for just fighting back like that. And we know he has the ability to fight back. We saw it in his first career win in Sakir in 2020. He has just been on fire, I think, this year in terms of his qualifying pace, getting a lot closer to Max. His race pace always being up there. He's kind of doing what we hadn't seen, or, what Mercedes had wanted Bottas to be, kind of the wingman, and what we didn't see from him last year, where Perez is always in the fight. He's always mixing it up with the guys at the top. And this year, if you want to say, it's kind of what Sainz hasn't been doing as of, most of the year, maybe save for the last few races. But yeah, I mean, just great drive by him, great damage limitation by both of them. And what can you say? I mean, a bad weekend, but I guess a good weekend overall for Red Bull. They get a car on the podium and they do a bunch of damage limitation. So moving on from Red Bull, we have Ferrari then. First, congratulations to Carlos Sainz on his first win. I even said in the Canadian GP podcast, this win was going to come. He's in one of the best cars on the grid. He's a really good driver. This win was going to come at some point this year, I thought, and maybe sooner than I expected here, but he gets the pole position. He gets the win. Just a great weekend for him. Congratulations. I know he enjoyed that one so much. He talked so much in the after show and, on the podium and how important this was and how iconic this was for him to do it with Ferrari at an iconic track like Silverstone. So he was over the moon and so happy for him. And happy that he finally kind of took control. He played the team game. Obviously he tried to stay out in front early in the race, but he ended up playing the team game. He said, okay, Charles can go by. I know, what we have to do as a team. At the end there, he just made his own decision. He said, look, you guys are wrong here. And he was right in saying that he needed to protect Leclerc. Totally the wrong decision. He would have got eaten up. He did the right thing, battled clean with Leclerc, passed him clean, and got his first win. So, good job there. Obviously, Leclerc's frustrated. He felt, I'm sure, that not only should he probably have been let by earlier, but the pit stop decision. What are Ferrari doing on the pit stop decision? Why don't they pit him? I mean, if you have a chance, this isn't like NASCAR where it's like, we'll stay out for track position on a green-white checker because we have 2 laps to go or something. No, there was 12 laps to go, I believe, and on old hard tires, what are you doing, Ferrari? I mean, obviously, if you pit Sainz, you expect Sainz to just kind of sit back there the entire time and hold up everybody else while Leclerc just trundles along in his old hard tires. I mean, there's no way that's going to happen. Leclerc was always going to get passed by all those guys. I know the safety car kind of came out at an inopportune time for them. They might not have been in the right spot to make that decision to pit. They still should have made the decision on the lap after and brought him in. So, frustrating for Ferrari. I saw a lot of people saying too, and I thought it was an interesting conversation around, the whole team orders thing where, and I'm a recent F1 fan. I can't speak to the sentiment that was, happening back in the old days with Ferrari, with Barrichello and Schumacher, but it felt like a lot of people back then, and, even now I think are still, they don't like team orders. It's obviously we want guys to race, right? We want them to race. We want them to have the action. If you want to win the race, go past the guy. And that's kind of how I felt too with Leclerc. I understand that at the end of the day, it would have been better for the team for them to let him by, but you're not racing for 13th and 14th. You're racing for first place, and this is Carlos Sainz's first win on the line. At some point in F1, it just feels like every time the top driver, if you will, Max, Lewis, Charles, Lewis last year at least, mostly, every time that they get close to someone, it's, just let them right by. Let them right by. It's you guys have to work for something at some point. You have to get past guys to win races. It's not just going to be, my teammate's in front of me, or we're going to let them right by. Carlos is fighting for the win. You got to get past him at some point. And I saw people, they're thrashing Ferrari on social media. Oh, it's such a stupid decision. Why didn't you let him by? They're probably the same people that are saying, we need to let him race. This, we need more racing. This is all politics and stuff. You got to pick one. I'm on the side. I can agree, obviously, that objectively, yes, it would have been for the team goal better for Ferrari to let Charles by because it would have allowed him to escape, kind of Lewis's pace there at the end. But I think that in the same vein, I would just much prefer them race. I think that honestly, you have to pass people to win. You have to cross Will Buxton. You have to cross the line first to win the race. It's you have to fight for it. And I don't like things just being handed out to drivers. So, from the team perspective, yeah, I get it. I understand why they would have made those team orders. But I just want to see the guys race. And I would rather them race and do what you have to do and let the chips fall where they may. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision, obviously, but I'm not a fan of team orders. I would rather, even if it messes up Ferrari's race, I just let them drive. Let them see what happens. They're supposed to go out there and fight for the win. Let them do it. So, It's kind of where I fall on that. It's again, a tough situation. But from Ferrari, let's move on. Mercedes. I mean, just incredible from Lewis Hamilton. I think he had that race won if it weren't for that safety car. He had an excellent weekend, excellent race, and it looked like, I mean, his pace was just outstanding. He was just flying. He was putting in fastest lap after fastest lap in all, sectors of the race there. And he was just doing a great job. And it felt like he was back. It felt like this was one of the first weekends where Lewis Hamilton was back. He was in the mix. And I honestly thought he was going to win the race. Being at home at Silverstone. Without that safety car, I think it would have been close, but I think he would have caught Leclerc. Ended up winning that race. So it is what it is for Lewis. I think he's a little frustrated with the P3, but you got to be happy if you're Mercedes getting the P3 where they didn't know where they were going to be. And speaking of, we have this new directive coming in from Paul Ricard with some of the way the floors are built. There's rumors that Ferrari and Red Bull might have to kind of rebuild the floor, rethink the design a little bit down there. So that, in addition to the whole porpoising thing, I think that could bring Mercedes closer. And hopefully they kind of enter this fight. I think that's what everyone wants to see here is Mercedes enter this fight, get 3 teams in it, and just let them have at it. And hopefully it's not too late for, Hamilton and Russell to. I don't think they're going to win the championship, but hopefully it's not too late for that. But yeah, I think that would be awesome for the Mercedes to get in. So that's down the line. A couple races down the line at Paul Ricard. So we'll see what happens there. And then George, it's frustrating for him. I think he was clearly at fault for that incident. Just kind of turned in on Pierre. There's nothing really to it. It was nice to see him kind of get out and go right over to Joe and kind of check on him. Saw a lot of memes about his incident last year at Imola with Bottas, how he treated that. A little different. And it's nice to see some growth from him, though. I do agree with the FIA saying he's not allowed to start the race. Look, even Toto Wolff said, hey, rules are rules. So there's a lot of complaints, I know, about him not being able to start the race. Said he stopped to check on Joe. He didn't stop because the car wouldn't go. Hey, man, it sucks. I would have loved to see him race, but that's just how it goes. You can't start the race again. So moving on to McLaren now. It was kind of a typical McLaren weekend, I would say. Lando in the mix. He was fighting with Fernando. He lost a spot at the end in the pits during the safety car to Fernando. I can't remember exactly where. And Lando finished, one spot behind Fernando. That's what I thought. But he was in the mix. He was up there kind of picking up the best of the rest. And Daniel was second to last in the race, 13th. In a race where only 14 people finished, Daniel Ricciardo was 13th. And, typical McLaren weekend. It's frustrating. I love McLaren. I love Daniel. I love Lando. Something's got to give here soon. Either Daniel's got to start performing or I don't know what's going to happen. Daniel's my favorite driver personally. I don't want to see him go. But, man, this is starting to get a little rough out here. So, we'll see what happens at McLaren there. Alpine, Ocon, of course, had the car failure. I don't know if it was an electrical failure, engine failure of some kind that he had down that back pit straight. And, so that was a little rough for them. They've had some can't speak. They've had some reliability issues this year. Kind of looked like they were a little bit past it. They ran really well in Canada. And obviously it got Ocon here, who was running in the points and wasn't able to finish in the points. And then Alonso again, kind of same story as Lando. Just kind of hanging around. Kind of best of the rest, having his own little race out there, and then the safety car, he kind of joined in that party late, and, doing Fernando things up there. Fernando and Lando both having pretty good years in terms of just kind of hanging up there and picking up whatever is thrown at them for, in terms of the Red Bull, the Ferrari, and the Mercedes not doing their job. So good job by both of them. And then moving on to AlphaTauri. Rough race for them. Pierre DNF, Yuki finishes last. And then, of course, the Yuki incident where he dives down at turn 2, rather. Turn 3? I'm trying to think. Yeah, turn 3. Down in that whole section down there. He dives down. Just a stupid move. He hits Pierre, gets the penalty for it. Both the cars, it seemed, got some damage, and they were on their way. And Helmut Marko even said that he thinks Yuki Tsunoda needs a psychologist because he's very angry. He's an angry driver, especially in the corners where he just dives down. He's angry on the radio, and obviously you hear that with Yuki. You know what you're getting with him in terms of his personality and his fiery personality and him yelling on the radio all the time. And he even yelled and was cussing out the team after that incident. But, man, I mean, Franz Toss. Getting my team principals mixed up here. Franz Toss already said that he was going to be, or that driver lineup was going to be the same next year. Nothing signed in the contract, though. Red Bull's got a lot of junior drivers. If Yuki doesn't start putting in some more consistent results, you never know. I mean, he had the crash in Canada on the pit lane after running well. Now he's had this. He had the incident in Baku with the rear wing. Obviously, that's not his fault, but it's been a string of rough races for Yuki. So he needs to start putting something together here as we move closer to the summer break. And, we'll see what he's got. Now, Alfa Romeo, thankfully, thank God, Zhou Guanyu was okay. I mean, again, I mentioned at the top, but a super scary crash. Halo did its job. Roll hoop, not so much. And we got to investigate that one, as I mentioned. That's obviously, again, to reiterate my point, it's not something that you essentially are expecting every race is the roll hoop to need to be used as the car flips over and crushes against the ground. But that's why safety regulations are in place, so that when that does happen, that it works properly. So hopefully they get that all squared away. And then on the other end of on the other side of the garage, Bottas with the DNF, just rough weekend for Alfa Romeo there. Not their best. You would have hoped with how much stuff went on, they maybe would have been able to survive. That's kind of the goal, I think, of all these bottom 5-ish teams is stay out of trouble, let everyone else crash, do whatever, and we'll just pick up the pieces. And speaking of that, that's kind of what the next two teams, Aston Martin and Haas, did, starting with Aston Martin. Vettel in 9th, Stroll in 11th. Stroll didn't get the points, obviously, but a good running from them. Vettel finishes in the points. I think that was all they could ask for, really. That's kind of where they're hanging around lately. I think they're doing better. They've got some upgrades on the car to where they're not down in the dumps every week. Saturdays are terrible. They cannot qualify that thing to save their lives. Granted, we've had 2 wet qualifyings in a row now. But, yeah, something needs to get done, because if they can improve that Saturday pace, they can really be looking at consistent points finishes. And I think that's kind of the goal, I would think, for them for the rest of the season. And also I want to talk about, Vettel had that little show run in Nigel Mansell's car, which I thought was really cool. And they used carbon-neutral fuel, so it was really sustainable. And I saw an article today that really interested me. I think it was an Autosport article. And they said, if we have carbon-neutral fuel, then why can't we just go back to engines that everyone loves, the V8s, the V10s, just make it fun for everybody. If emissions and fuel aren't going to be a problem, and we can just run it no matter what, why not? And that's an interesting point they bring up. Obviously they want the V6 hybrids that we have now. Those are really good engines, but I think a lot of people would love to see some V8s and V10s back on the track. And obviously we don't know which direction they'll go, but it's an awesome thing that they have that carbon neutral fuel in a car. It was 30 years ago and it still works. So it just goes to show the technology and kind of the forefront that F1 is at in terms of creating this technology and pushing science forward, because there's so much money going into this whole sport that they're constantly just coming up with new things and new ways to do things, and the regulations keep pushing the boundaries, and they push the teams to just get more efficient, work smarter, and it works, and it's awesome to see. So we'll see what that holds for the future, if there's anything with that. We know that F1's goal is to essentially be net zero by 2030, carbon net zero. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if that fuel factors into it at all, if that plays with the engine regulations. There's still a lot up in the air about the engine regulations in 2026, so we'll see how that goes. And moving on to the next team, second to last team here, Haas. Mick Schumacher, your first points finish, buddy. Good job, man. It was awesome to see Mick in the points. He was so happy. I thought he could have got P7. Max was a little on the edge there on that battle, but, it didn't seem too bad. He definitely ran Mick out of room a couple of times, but Mick was able to hang on. And I think it was good for Mick to just kind of realize that the battle was happening last couple laps of the race. No need to do any of that funny business. No need to dive down the inside. I think he was at the limit of where he needed to be, but he realized that, he needs to just finish in the points. And I thought it was interesting, too. Both the Red Bulls, I thought, could have very well gotten some reprimands, some penalties. Perez clearly went off on the Vale chicane in that whole battle with him, Leclerc, and Hamilton. And then he went off and pushed Hamilton again off the track. I thought he was going to get something out of that. Obviously, they chose not to do anything. Yes, it's it's hard racing. You don't want to interfere with the hard racing that was. But if we're going to be serious about track limits, he was 4 tires off the track, at least in the Vale chicane, came back, pushed Leclerc off the track, and then maintained his position on Leclerc. Yeah, he lost position to Hamilton, but that wasn't who he was battling. He was battling Charles Leclerc, and he lost that, or he kept that position. So that was a little bit of a rough one, I thought, and I thought there should have been something more said about that, done about that, but it is what it is. And then, of course, Kevin Magnussen and the points as well. Double points for Haas. Give it up for them. First time of the season. They were double top 10 in qualifying in Canada before it all fell apart. This time they actually get it all together. They get the double points finish. That was great to see for Haas, putting some momentum there. And finally, we come to Williams. It was an interesting weekend for Williams. They had all the upgrades on Alex Albon's car for qualifying, and he did terrible. And then they had no upgrades on Nicholas Latifi's car, and he made it to Q3. So, I don't know. It was a wet qualifying. It was a little weird. I think Alex mentioned something about the tire warm-up in Q1 that caused him, he was doing, I guess, too many cool-down laps, and he just said he couldn't get the tires in the right window. So, I guess the strategy there was his downfall. And, of course, we mentioned Albon was, involved in that huge crash in the beginning, so he didn't even get to race really much, and thankfully he was okay. He was in the hospital as well as Joe after the race, kind of sitting there, and he even posted a picture, I believe, on his Instagram of him kind of in the hospital bed saying, yep, I'm good, guys. So, yeah, good to see him okay. And then Nicholas Latifi, Q3. I mean, Q3 for Nicholas Latifi? Did you ever in your life think you would see that? Now, the funnier thing was that he was about 40 seconds behind the closest person in P9 because he didn't get a fast lap in. I believe he spun a couple of times. There was even a video trackside of him spinning on one of his Q3 laps. So, hey, he made it to Q3. That's all you can ask for. Did you expect him to make it anywhere higher? P9? Not really. It's a miracle he even made it that high. So, he gets into Q3, ended up finishing P12 in the race. Said it was fun after the race. He said he was able to get his elbows out a little bit and do some battles. He had a couple of nice battles with Stroll along the way. So, good for Latifi. Obviously, we don't know what his future holds. It's probably not in F1 next year, if I had to guess, with guys like Piastri and Logan Sargent down there. There's just so many names out there, young drivers out there that I think deserve a chance, that it's going to be hard to keep Nicholas Latifi in that seat next year, especially with the Dorilton funding coming in. I don't think Williams need that money as much. So, yeah, we'll definitely see there. So, that's my long-winded recap of the British GP. I hope you enjoyed it. Please, again, follow me down on the socials down here, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram. Hit me up there. Let me know what you think. Talk to me about F1. And, I'll be back pretty soon here. This is a little late Silverstone GP. Kind of things got in the way. I wasn't able to get this one done super early right after the race. So, as I'm filming this, we got Austria in about 6 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours. They're on the track pretty soon here in Austria. So, likely going to do the preview in between qualifying and the race, kind of like I did for Canada. So that way we'll get a little bit of a lay of the land of what we're going to see in Austria. And, so I'll see you pretty soon for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.